In the early hours of March 10, 1945, the city of Tokyo stirred under a fragile dawn. Most of its residents believed the war was a distant thunder, fought elsewhere. But that morning, the sky itself became an unexpected harbinger of devastation. Above the city, a sound unlike any they had heard before pierced the air, not the low rumble of Japanese fighters, nor the distant thunder of American bombers. This was something different. Fast, lethal, and almost invisible. The United States Army Air Forces had deployed a weapon the Japanese had never anticipated. The P-51 Mustang, fitted with drop tanks, capable of reaching 444 miles per hour, and capable of striking the heart of their empire with unprecedented speed. For Japanese pilots trained to expect B-29 bombers in high-altitude raids, the sight of sleek, solitary Mustangs screaming over the skyline was bewildering. These were not formations of slow, lumbering bombers. These were predators in the sky, fast, agile, and armed with a deadly precision that would change the rules of engagement over Tokyo forever. Imagine the pilots on the ground clutching the throttles of their Mitsubishi Zeros, staring up in disbelief. How could an enemy aircraft fly so fast, so far, and strike with such confidence? The very concept of drop tanks, external fuel pods extending the Mustang's range, had allowed the Americans to reach targets deep within the Japanese mainland, something previously thought impossible. This mission was more than a tactical maneuver. It was a psychological shock. For the Japanese air defense, it signaled a chilling reality. The war had finally come home. No city, no airfield, no pilot was truly safe. And yet, amid the chaos and confusion, there was a human story. The pilots who faced these new adversaries, the mechanics who prepared their planes, and the civilians who would soon witness history from the streets below. In a world where speed, surprise, and courage could mean the difference between life and death, the stage was set for a confrontation that neither side would forget. But before the engines roared and bullets tore through the sky, the Japanese pilots had no idea what was coming, and what they were about to face would redefine the air war over their homeland forever. The story of these fearless Mustangs, and the men who flew them, begins long before they appeared over Tokyo. To understand their impact, we must first explore the desperate state of Japan's SEP's defenses, and the human courage behind the machines that defended the rising sun. By early 1945, Japan's skies were a battleground of desperation. Years of relentless conflict had drained its resources, battered its cities, and left its military stretched thin. The once proud Imperial Japanese Navy and Army Air Forces, which had dominated the Pacific in the opening years of the war, were now struggling to defend a homeland under siege. The American Air War had evolved from the Mariana Islands, captured after months of brutal fighting. B-29 superfortresses could now reach the Japanese mainland with devastating payloads. But Tokyo, the beating heart of the empire, remained a fortress in the minds of its people. Its air defenses, though formidable on paper, were aging and overstretched. Fighters were scarce, radar coverage imperfect, and anti-aircraft batteries scattered. For the Japanese, the threat had always been clear: slow, high-flying bombers that could be detected, tracked, and intercepted. But what happened next defied every expectation. The U.S. Army Air Forces had developed a new tool for the skies, the North American P-51 Mustang. Sleek, fast, and now equipped with drop tanks, detachable fuel pods that extended its range to nearly 1,000 miles, these fighters could strike deep into enemy territory and return safely. The Japanese had never encountered such an aircraft in combat over their own cities. The Mustang was more than just a machine. It was the culmination of strategy, engineering, and human ingenuity. Pilots like Major George Priddy, Colonel John C. Meyer, and others were trained for long-range missions that demanded precision, courage, and split-second decision-making. They carried the weight not just of their missions, but of an entire war effort, tasked with proving that no part of the Japanese mainland was beyond reach. For Japanese defenders, the world had grown smaller overnight. The idea that an American fighter could cross hundreds of miles of open ocean, appear unannounced over Tokyo, and escape before interception was almost inconceivable. Drop tanks had turned a tactical advantage into a strategic nightmare. Suddenly, distance no longer protected the cities, the factories, or the civilians below. Every flight was a gamble, every sortie a test of nerve and skill. And yet, history is never just about machines or strategy. It is about the people caught in the gears of war. The Japanese pilots who scrambled from their airfields, the mechanics who worked through the night, the citizens who watched the sky with growing dread, all were actors in a drama whose stakes were as human as they were tactical. They did not yet know that the Mustang, flying at 444 miles per hour with drop tanks, would soon redefine the very concept of air combat over their homeland. In the next chapter, we meet the men on both sides of the sky, the Japanese pilots who were about to face an impossible adversary, and the American pilots who carried the weight of a strategy that demanded speed, courage, and precision. Their stories are intertwined by a moment in history when innovation and bravery collided over Tokyo, a moment that would leave an indelible mark on the war. The skies above Tokyo were about to erupt in a deadly ballet of speed, fire, and human courage. And for the pilots below, the first sign of the Mustang would be a shock that no training could have prepared them for. In war, the machines may roar, but it is the human heart that feels the weight of history. On March 10th, 1945, every figure in the sky over Tokyo carried a story, fear, duty, hope, and sacrifice, intertwined with the roar of engines and the rattle of anti-aircraft fire. Lieutenant Hiroshi Takeda, a young fighter pilot stationed near Tokyo, scribbled a hurried note to his family before takeoff. "If I do not return," he wrote, "know that I fought to protect our home, our people, and the honor of our skies." Like many of his comrades, Takeda faced not just the physical threat of the enemy, but the psychological strain of knowing the odds were turning against him. Every mission felt heavier, every sortie a confrontation not only with the Mustang but with the reality of a war spiraling toward Japan's heart. Across the Pacific, the American pilots carried their own burdens. Men like Captain James "Jimmy" Stewartson, though far from Hollywood fame, knew that speed and precision were their only allies. The drop tanks, simple in design but revolutionary in function, were a lifeline. Without them, their mission would be impossible. Every glance at the gauges, every knot of tension in their shoulders spoke of the danger they willingly embraced. And then there were the civilians, ordinary men, women, and children, who looked to the sky with a mixture of fear and fascination. Few understood the full scope of the Mustang's capabilities. To them, the approaching aircraft were ghosts of war, moving faster than comprehension, each one a potential harbinger of fire and destruction. They were witnesses to history, powerless to intervene, yet deeply entwined in its consequences. The human stake was immense. Every pilot on both sides carried not just weapons, but the weight of responsibility, the lives of comrades, the defense of homeland, and the strategic ambitions of their nations. They had been trained, drilled, and prepared, yet nothing could fully equip them for the terror and unpredictability of combat at 444 miles per hour over a sprawling city below. Till the engines scream, I pray the pilots return. Tokyo burns in my mind even before the planes leave the runway. Dote. Here, in these small moments of human vulnerability, the story of the Mustang over Tokyo truly begins. It is not only a tale of speed and technology, but of courage, fear, and the choices ordinary people make when confronted with extraordinary circumstances. Each heartbeat, each glance skyward, each trembling hand on a throttle would determine the difference between life and death, for pilots and civilians alike. As the first Mustangs approached, the Japanese pilots scrambled, their Zeros slicing through the morning haze. The tension was palpable. Every second counted, every decision mattered, and for the men in the sky, the coming confrontation would test not only their skill, but their very humanity. Soon, the calm of dawn would shatter. The rising conflict above Tokyo would force pilots into a deadly ballet, where speed met skill and courage met fear. The skies were about to erupt, and the outcome would be unlike anything either side had imagined. The calm of early morning was deceptive. Far above Tokyo, the whine of P-51 Mustang engines cut through the sky like a blade. Sleek, silver, and almost alien, these aircraft moved with a speed and precision that left Japanese radar operators struggling to track them. Each Mustang carried a deadly combination of machine guns, drop tanks, and the confidence of pilots trained to strike swiftly and vanish. Lieutenant Takeda and his squadron scrambled from their airfield as the alarm bells rang. The moment had arrived. Years of training, months of tension, and the fear of failure converged into a single instant. Yet even as he accelerated down the runway, Takeda knew that these were not the slow bombers he had expected. These were Mustangs, a new predator, fast and relentless. His hand gripped the throttle, heart pounding, as he climbed into the morning sky, determined to defend his city. The confrontation was as much psychological as it was physical. Japanese pilots had been trained to anticipate high-flying B-29 bombers, lumbering targets with predictable flight paths. The Mustangs, however, approached at 444 miles per hour, weaving through clouds, appearing almost from nowhere. For defenders on the ground and in the air, reaction time was measured in seconds. One misstep, one misjudgment, and lives would be lost. Anti-aircraft batteries roared to life, sending shells and flak into the sky. Civilians below watched in awe and terror, their shadows stretching over streets that had already known too much suffering. Tokyo's defenses, once confident in their ability to repel attackers, were now scrambling to understand this new threat. The Mustangs moved too fast for many gunners to track, darting through flak with uncanny precision, forcing the defenders to react instinctively rather than strategically. For the American pilots, every second mattered. Drop tanks extended their reach, but also made them slightly more vulnerable, heavier in the air. They had to strike decisively, neutralize targets quickly, and retreat before the Zeros or anti-aircraft fire could respond. Each maneuver was a careful dance, speed against skill, courage against fear, precision against chaos. The rising conflict was more than numbers and machines. It was a clash of strategy, instinct, and human will. Takeda realized the odds were stacked against him, yet he could not afford hesitation. His comrades depended on him, and the people of Tokyo depended on them. In those tense moments, above a city holding its breath, the battle of wits, reflexes, and courage had begun. As the first shots rang out, it became clear that this engagement would not resemble any previous air combat. The speed of the Mustangs, the reach of their drop tanks, and the skill of their pilots created a new reality in the skies above Japan, one that the defenders could scarcely comprehend, and that would leave a lasting impression on all who survived it. The first exchanges of gunfire had only hinted at the chaos to come. Soon the confrontation would reach its darkest moments, pushing both pilots and civilians to the brink. And in that crucible, heroism and tragedy would collide in ways no one could predict. As the Mustangs tore through Tokyo's skies, the human cost of war became impossible to ignore. For the Japanese pilots, the battle was no longer about strategy or training, it was a desperate struggle for survival. The speed and agility of the P-51s left them disoriented, forced into split-second decisions that could mean life or death. Lieutenant Hiroshi Takeda dove through the clouds, tracing the silhouette of a Mustang as it passed overhead. His heart raced. Every maneuver he made was a gamble. A single miscalculation could send him plunging into Tokyo's outskirts, or worse, leave him exposed to a sudden burst of machine gun fire. Around him, comrades were already falling, black smoke marking the spots where courage met fate. Below, the city itself trembled. Tokyo's civilians had become involuntary witnesses to a war they could neither control nor escape. The roar of engines, the whistling of bullets, and the shock of flak tearing through the sky created a terrifying symphony. Some clung to rooftops, hoping to catch a glimpse of history, others prayed simply to survive. Across the Pacific, Mustang pilots faced their own challenges. Drop tanks increased their range, but they added weight and vulnerability. One misstep in a dive or turn could send a pilot spiraling into disaster. Captain James Stewartson, gripping the throttle, realized that every second in Tokyo's airspace was a balance between mission success and mortal danger. For the Americans, victory was not guaranteed. It was earned through precision, nerve, and sheer will. I have never flown so fast. They are everywhere, and yet nowhere. I fear we are chasing ghosts. The breaking point came as the first real exchanges of fire occurred. Zeros attempted to engage, but the Mustang's superior speed made interception nearly impossible. Anti-aircraft batteries sprayed the sky with flak, yet the Mustangs sliced through it like shadows. Takeda's squadron, exhausted and outmatched, began to falter. Some pilots were forced to break off, retreating under the pressure of superior technology and relentless aggression. In those moments, the weight of the human experience was undeniable. Fear gripped pilots on both sides. For the defenders, there was the sting of helplessness, the knowledge that no amount of skill could fully counter the new threat. For the attackers, there was the relentless tension of responsibility, to strike accurately, to survive, and to return to base. Tokyo's skies had become a crucible, testing courage, skill, and the very limits of human endurance. The crisis above Tokyo would push every pilot, every soldier, and every civilian to their limits. Lives hung in the balance, and history was being written in smoke and fire. But even in the darkest hour, a turning point was coming, a moment when ingenuity, bravery, and a single daring strategy would shift the tide of the skies over Japan forever. In the next chapter, we witness the turning point, the spark of hope amid chaos, the clever tactics and courageous acts that would allow the Mustangs to achieve the unthinkable. In the heart of chaos, the tide of battle began to shift, not through sheer numbers, but through precision, courage, and a deep understanding of the sky. The Mustangs, fast and relentless, had already disoriented the Japanese pilots. Now the Americans began to exploit their advantage with ruthless efficiency. Captain James Stewartson and his fellow pilots knew that success depended on timing and coordination. The drop tanks allowed them to extend their reach, giving them enough fuel to strike deep, maneuver aggressively, and retreat safely. But it wasn't just technology, it was the skill, intuition, and calm under pressure that allowed these men to turn the tide. Each Mustang became a predator, each maneuver a calculated gamble. Lieutenant Hiroshi Takeda, exhausted and disoriented, realized he was being outmatched. The Mustang's speed allowed them to appear unexpectedly, strike decisively, and vanish before retaliation. In desperation, Takeda's squadron attempted a coordinated maneuver, a last-ditch effort to regain control of the skies. But it was too late. The Americans had anticipated the tactics, and the Japanese pilots were forced onto the defensive. The turning point came when a small squadron of Mustangs executed a daring low-altitude attack, skimming over the city's rooftops, forcing flak crews to scramble. The speed, surprise, and audacity of the move disoriented defenders, giving the Americans a critical advantage. It was a moment where strategy met courage, a calculated risk that required nerves of steel and absolute precision. On the ground, mechanics and commanders watched with a mixture of awe and fear. The Japanese defense was formidable, but the Mustangs had rewritten the rules. Every successful attack increased their confidence. Every evasive maneuver reinforced the reality that the balance had shifted. The human spirit, bravery, decisiveness, and resilience was now as crucial as any machine in the sky. For the citizens of Tokyo, the turning point was invisible but palpable. The shriek of engines no longer carried only terror. It carried the uncertainty of survival, the raw reminder of war's unpredictability. Each Mustang strike, each evasive maneuver, was a testament to human ingenuity and courage, a reminder that even in the heart of destruction, skill and daring could create a moment of control amid chaos. This turning point marked a subtle but decisive reversal. What had begun as a near-impossible mission, striking deep into Tokyo's airspace with speed and surprise, was now proving its effectiveness. The Mustangs had demonstrated that technology, training, and daring could combine to overcome even the most entrenched defenses. But the battle was far from over. What followed would be the full execution of this daring operation, a sequence of events that demanded precision, courage, and nerves unshakable under fire. The skies of Tokyo were about to witness the climax of one of the most audacious air raids in history. But the PALs of Tokyo were about to witness the climax of one of the most audacious air raids in history. The success of the Mustang mission over Tokyo was no accident. Every aspect, from planning to execution, was meticulously calculated. Pilots, mechanics, and commanders worked in unison, balancing risk, speed, and precision to achieve a goal that had once seemed impossible. The Mustangs, outfitted with drop tanks, took off under the cover of early morning darkness. The external tanks provided the extra fuel needed to cross nearly 1,000 miles of open ocean, giving the pilots enough endurance to strike Tokyo and return safely. Each pilot knew the route intimately, the ocean currents, the winds, the high-altitude paths that minimized detection by Japanese radar. Approaching Japanese airspace, the Mustangs broke formation to reduce the risk of mass targeting by anti-aircraft fire. Some pilots flew higher to draw attention, while others skimmed the clouds at low altitude, preparing for precise strikes. This combination of tactics, speed, stealth, and coordination would define the success of the operation. Once over Tokyo, the Mustangs executed a series of high-speed attack runs. They targeted airfields, anti-aircraft positions, and key infrastructure, exploiting their speed and maneuverability. Every move was synchronized, each pilot relying on instinct honed by rigorous training. The drop tanks, a seemingly simple piece of equipment, were critical, allowing the Mustangs to extend their reach without sacrificing agility. The Japanese pilots, despite courage and skill, struggled to keep pace. Heroes attempted intercepts, but the Mustang's speed, combined with tactical maneuvering, allowed them to engage and disengage at will. Every engagement was a brief, deadly dance, an exchange of fire measured in fractions of seconds, a test of skill and nerve where mistakes were fatal. On the ground, civilians watched the operation unfold with a mixture of fear and disbelief. The precision of the attacks, combined with the speed at which they occurred, created a surreal spectacle. For many, the sounds of engines, gunfire, and flak seemed almost unreal, as though the city had become a stage for a ballet of death in the sky. The strategic execution was a testament to human coordination and courage. Each pilot's actions were guided by both training and instinct, relying on split-second calculations to strike and survive. The mission's success was not guaranteed, but by combining innovation, planning, and daring, the Mustangs achieved something that reshaped the perception of air power over the Japanese mainland. The operation unfolded with relentless efficiency, a blend of human skill and technological advantage that left defenders scrambling. Yet, even as the mission succeeded, the skies were still dangerous, and the final, decisive moments were yet to come, moments that would define the legacy of the Mustang over Tokyo. In the next chapter, we reach the climax, the reversal, the decisive moment when the daring mission either triumphed or faltered, and history would be written in speed, courage, and fire. The skies above Tokyo had become a theater of precision and chaos. The Mustangs, streaking through the morning haze at 444 miles per hour, executed their attacks with relentless efficiency. Every maneuver, every shot was a gamble, and the consequences were immediate, lethal, and irreversible. Lieutenant Takeda, exhausted and disoriented, watched the sleek silhouettes of Mustangs dart across the sky. His squadron had been scattered, anti-aircraft fire had claimed its toll, and yet the Americans pressed on with precision that defied comprehension. Every pass brought destruction, but also a fleeting chance for defenders to regroup, if only they could react fast enough. In the cockpit of his Mustang, Captain James Stewartson knew the mission was reaching its decisive moment. His squadron approached an airfield that had been a hub of Japanese activity for years. Anti-aircraft batteries were firing relentlessly, but the Mustang's speed and coordination allowed them to strike, retreat, and repeat. Each maneuver was calculated, a deadly ballet of precision and timing. The reversal had arrived. What had begun as a desperate, audacious mission was now a display of mastery. The defenders, once confident in their ability to repel attackers, were forced onto the defensive. Pilots like Takeda scrambled, maneuvering desperately, but the Mustangs dictated the terms of engagement. The outcome was no longer uncertain. It was unfolding with stunning clarity. Speed, technology, and human courage had triumphed over expectation. Though they strike like lightning, faster than the eye can follow. Our planes fall, one by one. I do not know if we will survive this morning. The final moments of the engagement were a mix of precision and chaos. Mustang pilots executed repeated attack runs, targeting airfields, anti-aircraft positions, and infrastructure critical to Japan's war effort. Japanese pilots, despite skill and valor, could only react. The skies were no longer a contest of equals, they were a demonstration of what could be achieved when planning, courage, and technology aligned. For those on the ground, the climax was a vision of terror and awe. Tokyo's skyline was scarred by fire and smoke. The roar of engines and the rattle of gunfire echoed across the city. And yet, amid the destruction, there was a stark human truth. Courage and ingenuity could turn the tide, even in the most desperate circumstances. In the skies above Tokyo, the reversal was complete. The Mustangs had struck, maneuvered, and survived. The defenders had been challenged beyond expectation, their courage tested, and their reality forever altered. In those fleeting moments of speed, fire, and human skill, history had been made, a lesson in innovation, daring, and the human capacity to adapt under pressure. But the story does not end with victory in the air. The aftermath, the cost, the human toll, and the legacy of this daring raid would linger long after the engines fell silent. As the roar of engines faded and the Mustangs disappeared into the distance, a heavy silence settled over Tokyo. The city had survived the immediate attack, but the impact, both physical and psychological, was undeniable. Buildings bore scars from anti-aircraft fire, airfields were damaged, and the people had witnessed the raw power of an enemy who could strike with speed, precision, and seeming impunity. For the Japanese pilots, the aftermath was a mix of relief, frustration, and reflection. Lieutenant Takeda and his surviving comrades returned to their airfields, grappling with the knowledge that, despite their skill and bravery, the Mustangs had rewritten the rules of engagement. Each damaged plane, each lost squadron member, was a painful reminder of vulnerability, a reality that forced a hard reckoning with the changing nature of the air war. On the American side, the pilots landed safely, exhausted but elated. Their meticulous planning, training, and courage had paid off. Yet even in triumph, there was a sobering recognition of risk. Each mission carried the shadow of potential failure, and every sortie reminded them that survival was never guaranteed, even with superior technology and strategy. For Tokyo's civilians, the psychological toll was profound. The knowledge that the war had reached their skies, that no distance or city could fully shield them, left an indelible mark. Fear mingled with awe at the speed, precision, and audacity of the Mustang pilots. Letters and diaries from the time capture a mixture of resignation, anxiety, and quiet admiration for the skill displayed above their rooftops. The planes have returned. Many are gone. I pray the pilots will endure, though the city trembles under the weight of our failure. The aftermath extended beyond immediate damage. Strategically, the raid demonstrated that the Japanese mainland was no longer beyond reach. Mustangs equipped with drop tanks had proved that long-range fighters could penetrate deep into enemy territory, striking with speed and precision that B-29 bombers alone could not achieve. The psychological effect on Japan's military command, air defense units, and civilians was as significant as the material damage inflicted. In these moments of aftermath, the human dimension of war was clear. Courage, skill, and innovation had met fear, endurance, and loss. Lives had been risked, some lost, and yet history had been indelibly marked. The skies above Tokyo were forever changed, not only by the roar of Mustang engines, but by the realization that technology, strategy, and daring could redefine the nature of conflict. The story of that morning is not simply one of victory or destruction. It is a story of human endurance under extreme circumstances, of pilots, mechanics, and civilians navigating fear, courage, and the relentless unpredictability of war. And as the echoes of that raid faded, its lessons lingered, shaping the remainder of the Pacific Air War. In the final chapter, we reflect on the legacy of the Mustang over Tokyo, a tale of innovation, courage, and the enduring human spirit amidst the chaos of war. The roar of Mustang engines has long faded from the skies above Tokyo, but the echoes remain. That morning, when sleek fighters streaked across the horizon at 444 miles per hour, they did more than strike targets. They reshaped the perception of air warfare, leaving an enduring legacy for both the pilots who flew and the people who lived under their wings. The Mustangs, with their drop tanks and unmatched speed, proved that innovation could overcome even the most formidable defenses. But history is never only about technology. It is about the courage, determination, and resilience of the human beings who operate it. Lieutenant Takeda, Captain Stewartson, and countless others faced fear, uncertainty, and the spectre of death. Yet they carried on, their decisions, their skill, their bravery, etched permanently into history. For civilians, the raid was a stark reminder of vulnerability and survival. Families, children, and entire communities witnessed the extremes of human courage and human suffering. Their experiences, recorded in diaries, letters, and oral histories, ensure that the lessons of that day are not forgotten, that war touches every life it encounters, and that bravery manifests in many forms, in the cockpit, on the ground, and in the hearts of those who endure. The legacy of the Mustang over Tokyo is twofold. Tactically, it changed the calculus of air warfare, proving the effectiveness of long-range, high-speed fighter operations deep within enemy territory. Psychologically, it altered perceptions, showing that speed, innovation, and courage could overcome even the most entrenched defenses. And personally, it reminds us of the human spirit, the willingness to confront fear, to make split-second decisions under impossible pressure, and to shape history through action. As we look back today, the story of the Mustangs over Tokyo is more than a tale of warplanes and strategy. It is a story about people, their courage, their choices, and their enduring legacy. It is a testament to the human capacity to innovate, to endure, and to face the unimaginable with resolve. If this story moved you, remember the lessons it carries: courage in the face of adversity, ingenuity in the heart of chaos, and the resilience of the human spirit. And if this story moved you, like, comment, and subscribe for more echoes of history.